son. Where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. Oh, yeah. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
Isn't that thing so much stupider in person?
Bro, that's the best intro in podcasting right there. The minute that comes on, I'm like, yes, son, we're ready to go.
It's the explosions, dude. I'm telling you. It's the explosions. You add an explosion sound effect to anything and it becomes immediately cooler.
Oh, dude, and that low voice. Buckle up,
Oh,
bitches.
yeah. Bitches.
That's enough to get me fucking psyched up.
Oh, dude, it's so stupid. All right, we're back here. Totally Legitimate Business Podcast, and we're joined once again by Dakota McCormick.
Thank you guys so much.
Welcome back to the show. Here
Thanks
we
for
are.
having me, buddy.
Hey, thanks for coming all the way out here to have this ridiculous conversation. We've got a doozy for everybody today. What were we gonna do? What were we gonna do? Barry Seal.
Yeah.
Okay, that's still a crazy story. We should definitely do that. But in light of the past couple weeks, I think we have to address this. And what I'm referring to is Quiet on the Set.
Yeah.
And for those of you who haven't seen Quiet on the Set, it is the documentary, I think, on the Investigation Discovery Channel about the shenanigans and fuckery regarding child safety in the production of all your favorite Nickelodeon childhood TV shows. So let's just go ahead. That happening in the background right there is perfect. Before we get into like the crazy conspiracy elements that I have been familiar with, I think I just want to say really quickly that this is something that is not new. I was watching YouTube videos about this shit a long fucking time ago. Even when Jamie Lynn Spears has the whole pregnancy thing, as that was playing out, there were actually videos talking about this scandal. It was just the social climate wasn't ready to accept it as a reality. But for you, what did you feel? Like, what made you watch it? And then what do you feel after watching it?
So it's funny you say that, because what made me watch it was like you. I had seen other things about this subject, right? I had seen, I think her name is Alexa Nicholas. She had done an interview with Ethan Klein that I watched, and she had talked about a whole bunch of stuff that was in this documentary. There was another really awesome like essayist documentarian named Philion who did a great piece about this like almost 2 years ago. So that was kind of like my reason for going in, was because I think the internet has sort of been aware of this situation on some level.
Sure, yeah.
For quite some time now, because there's been select individuals willing to talk about it. But I think seeing something that had a little bit more of like a full spectrum and more people's experience, and it just gave a deeper understanding for what had kind of been being murmured already. You know what I mean? And obviously these were all shows that for people our age, like we were all watching this shit, man. That was still at the tail end of like non-internet consensus culture where we were all sitting around the TV for the same shit at the same time. And so it is sort of this like shared experience that all of these things were very influential in our upbringing. But unfortunately, especially being kids at the time, we weren't aware of what was going into that process.
Yeah, you know, it's there's like a level of naivete that people who have never been involved in a production of any kind have about what goes into making it. Like, let's just remove the abuse of these kids. Taking child actors and having them work the way that they're working, that alone is intense. That can create a bunch of problems.
Sure.
But then add a few predators into the mix, and that just makes a very unsafe situation. And I think most people really are fooled by the sitcom. They think that their lives are exactly like the characters they play on the show. Mm-hmm. They think that everyone there is friends, and they don't understand it's like just as catty as any local office building, right, or any, job where you have coworkers that get on your nerves.
Or if the show makes them feel a certain kind of way, right? Yeah. If you're watching the Cosby Show and you got that real wholesome feeling after, it's hard to imagine that the thing or the person that supplied you with that was doing really dark shit.
Sinister stuff.
And I think that that's part of this show, is it's a little hard to imagine, especially having experienced these shows as kids, we're not putting that context at the time for the most part. I mean, like you and I were joking about Pickle Boy before the show, but I was never, as a 7-year-old, walking around thinking, "Oh, Pickle Boy is a real delinquent."
Yeah, right.
You know? I just thought he was like a goofy
what
guy,
a degenerate. Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. I think that's what allowed them to get away with it for so long. I mean, they talk about it a fair amount in the documentary, but like ultimately, the fucking higher ups approved this shit. Like, it's not one person that decided to put it on air. Like, a lot of people had to sign off on it. And there was a level in particular with Dan Schneider's work where there was like this subtly sexual vibe. Even the people that were doing it when they were doing it knew it was like a little.
Well, I think this was actually leads to a couple other reasons why I was interested in the show. I think there was something about what's happened to Amanda Bynes in general
100%.
that's been very stymieing, because when we were growing up, I can't really think of too many young actors that were that talented and charismatic. And then when you see her on the internet now and just kind of,
the shell,
you know, respectfully, she's a shell of a person that she used to be. And then Aaron Carter dying in the manner that he did. These are all people from
that era,
our age group, in that same era that came up in this thing. And so you go back and you watch, you know, Aaron's World, or you know, That's How I Beat Shaq, and it's hard to contextualize how you get from A to B, but it just seems like that's happening over and over again.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about who's disappeared. Why, you know, Drake Bell was a really talented musician at 15 years old. Why is this guy now, by choice, not a part of the entertainment industry? So it definitely draws you in.
But he is. He just moved to Mexico after his whole SA situation.
Right, I know
he
this
went down
now.
to Mexico.
I know
but like
this now.
he was, again, like that was another thing I was kind of watching play out in real time as that scandal started to break, and the magnifying glasses on him. He was just like, I'm going to Mexico. I'm not going to face the same judgment or stigma here. But yeah, I mean, dude, it's like maybe Frankie Muniz might be one from that era of child actors who like lives a reasonable existence. Like, he's mostly
Justin
coherent.
Timberlake,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Seems
But I mean,
put together.
even after Britney's book, I don't know if you read into that.
I know a little bit about it.
So like, you know, he was a dick. He was a huge dick, and a lot of young celebrities probably are huge dicks.
I think that what we can hope is that they're just assholes and they're not deviant.
Yeah, predatory. Yeah,
being an asshole. You know, beyond just, you know, making somebody uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, sure. That's fine. You want to be a dick, like that's 100% your choice. But it's when you start to prey on people. You know, I there's the adage that, like, you know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, people who get abused are more likely to abuse in the future. There's what made Brian Peck and Dan Schneider that way. You know, did that completely emerge out of some internal origin, or was there some kind of like trauma that led them to be that way?
Right.
Not justifying their actions, they're still pieces of shit. But you know, it's just crazy to see how like you put a couple people like that into a situation and you forever fuck up the lives of like so many impressionable people. And, you know, the whole like analyzing a child celebrity, that's definitely nothing new. And there's definitely been a ton of exploitation across, you know, the past 100 years of media. But I think that like Disney and Nickelodeon, especially during that era, it was just crazy. They didn't even really get into the Ren and Stimpy guy. And I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole at all. But
that's another one I have the Spark Notes on, but I'm aware of him.
Yeah. See if I
another one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, this guy. This, you know, I remember as a kid watching Ren and Stimpy and being like, wow, this is extreme, even for children. But you know, you don't really think too much of that until, I I don't know if this is going to have anything about his scandal. Yeah. So, you know, we don't necessarily even need to go into the details with that, but he's a sadistic person who is hurting children and manipulating people for long periods of time, vampirically sucking all of their life source from them, all for the ability to continue to, I don't know, remain creative. You know, and then there's like, how do you separate the art from the artist? You know, those things, those childhood TV shows had whatever impact on you.
I think,
you know, does it forever ruin those or taint those?
I think it's more tainted in that kind of situation where he's the primary creator. I still got the sense from the show that like the kids enjoyed the actual process of doing the sketches. That was almost the escape from the hell that was around it. So when Drake Bell says like, oh, I love nothing more than performing, like I still see something like Drake and Josh as okay with enjoying, because that's the only thing he had that he enjoyed at that time. Because Brian Peck essentially took the rest of that away from him. So I tend to say, you know, when we're viewing these things now with a different set of context, just view it with that different set of context. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to erase it from history, but I don't think that we have to pretend, you know, that these things didn't happen and that the feeling that we had at that time is the only reality. You know what I mean? We have to engage with that, the fact that, and we're watching the entertainment industry as a whole fall apart now because all of these incentives and relationships are completely fucked up. The way the money gets distributed for, you know, streaming and various, just how resources and time and treatment of people get distributed in entertainment is all up in the air right now. And I think we're collectively doing a review of, all right, at this time, media was in a better place. How did things happen? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How did we get to this point where the strike was going on for months? You know what I mean? Where the industries we work in, you know, are supposed to be these liberal bastions, but everyone's so wildly underpaid. How did we get to this point? And it started with all this shit, you know?
Well, I mean, it has gotten better, but yeah, ultimately, like that's what always trips me out is just to think like conditions are safer now, but I wouldn't necessarily say they're better. But it's because of things like events like this that happen, and people have to come in and be like, we need to re-envision how we're doing this.
The exploitation probably looks different now because the young people of today are influencers, right? So whether it's pressure from their parents to do advertisements or whatever, I think that comes with its own set of issues.
Yeah.
For these young people where, as opposed to being on a show where you're kind of separated, that there's that wall up between you and the audience. Now the audience is all talking to them all at once.
Yeah.
And I would imagine for a child that's difficult to process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we'll see what the long-term effects of this shit are if we make it the next 20 or 30 years. But it's probably not going to be good. Just generally, it's probably not going to be good.
I think it changes everything, bro. It changes everything. Because think about this. I just saw a kid at the gas station that was probably 13 pumping gas. That's a responsibility that kid probably shouldn't have at that age. Now put them on a television set.
Yeah.
You know, and what comes with that, and the time that comes with that, and the effort that comes with that, and the level of discipline like a lot of adults can't handle that.
Definitely.
So now you're forcing this 12-year-old or, you know, whatever into this professional world.
Well, I mean, you know, that's why a lot of the child celebrities, like you hear, this is tale as fucking old as time. Like all the ones that are fortunate enough to make it into their older life, that don't struggle with addiction because of the abuse they suffered, the ones that make it, you know, they write the book, and like Jeanette McCurdy, Drew Barrymore. Like they get old enough to process and be like, oh, I got robbed of my childhood. And I was constantly trying to numb that pain with this or with that. And it's, there's like the South Park episode where they sacrifice Britney Spears. And like Hannah Montana's next, right? But that's
Britney rocking the no top of her head look.
Yeah, right, exactly. But that's
so funny, dude.
But that's it's metaphorically pretty accurate in the sense that for our entertainment, like that it costs that child's life. Are you okay? I guess the question I'm asking is, are you okay with the entertainment if it costs children's lives?
Right, and hopefully the answer is no, and that's going to force us to rethink how we make stuff. Completely rethink how we make stuff.
Well, but here's the other thing too. It's not necessarily how we make stuff, because how we make stuff, again, like there have been tons of improvements. Like horrible accidents on set mean they have new safety precautions that are mandatory. Sure. Some person behaving unsafely or conducting people unsafely, like that, ultimately that person's probably not going to get a job at some point because they're going to be a liability because of all these new safety protocols that exist. On top of like whatever things are supposed to exist there for protecting children on sets, letting parents be there, or the monitoring of children when parents aren't there. But I guess really the point where I'm going with this is like, not all productions are like that. Weinstein productions are like that. Dan Schneider productions or Brian Peck productions are like that. Specific people,
which go on for decades.
Yeah, no, really. And it's again, it doesn't really even excuse the other people that were around and saw it going on and allowed it to happen. We've worked a ton of jobs. If I ever saw some shit that was unsafe, I wasn't doing it. I wasn't letting anybody that I was working with do it. That's just not necessarily a level of safety that everyone abides by. But it's not every single thing. It's not every single production. There's plenty of child actors who have been child actors who are in good situations surrounded by reasonable adults, and they become reasonable adult actors.
Right.
But by and large, a lot of the kids who enter into Disney, Nickelodeon, or to a lesser extent Hollywood, like Disney's like the farm.
Yeah, and that one's probably coming next,
dude. If you and they're trying desperately, boardrooms of lawyers trying to keep that shit under wraps. Like the amount of money they've paid people to remain quiet about their experience.
Well, the good news, right, is that I think the internet is operating as its own entity, as just like the public square.
Yeah.
And if people are willing to talk and share, somebody on the internet is going to tell that story, whether it's the person themselves or someone else is going to help them facilitate that. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this documentary was like, it feels like this is about a year and a half behind everything else that we had watched about this prior. So I think it shows you like traditional media is just kind of behind the ball.
Well, I wonder that too. But then I also have to remind myself that I personally am willing to entertain some fringe shit. And in just about every area of my life, I'll listen to fringe music, I'll watch fringe movies, right. I'll consume fringe media. It's not necessarily that I believe everything I consume. It's just I'm not afraid of consuming it. I feel very comfortable with my opinions about it. What am I trying to say here? The whole thing that I'm trying to say here.
I don't think everybody is comfortable.
That's what I mean.
That.
Like for investigation discovery, their normal shit is like 2020 murder investigations. Right. That's an acceptable, like super pro law enforcement, pro victims' rights. That's something that generally most people in this country would watch and be like, okay, I'm not offended by this.
Right.
I am willing to watch stuff and consume stuff that offends me. I'm not scared of it. But most people aren't. So you and I might be willing to watch those YouTube videos, but a lot of people, especially when we start to talk about like the sadistic abuse of children, a lot of people don't even want to hear it. They won't even accept the reality of it. Like there's so many times where I try to explain to people the reality of it and why it's important to talk about it. And if you have kids, to tell your kids about, safe, good touch, bad touch, it's important you let them know that, because this is a sick fucking world and it happens all the time.
And you could even have,
in places where you think there's no way it could happen there, it happens there.
And you could even have an attentive parent like Drake Bell's pops, who clearly caught on to what the guy was doing, was on top of it, and the system did everything it could to separate them. So that Brian Peck manipulated the system. Like there was no system. He just was like, "Oh, we're going to do it this way now," and everyone was just like, "Well, Brian's the boss." So he's the dialogue coach. Of course, they're all at his house.
You know, Courtney and I have been talking about this a bunch, but I won't be shocked at some point in the future if we get some stories about Leonardo DiCaprio and Brian Peck, because Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, those videos are horrifying, bro.
And he worked. Why does Leo only date people who are so old? Why is he not going to get married? There's a lot to suggest.
That could also be, he's just a good-looking older guy who can do it.
Sure,
so good for him. But
it is also a thing for people in Hollywood to have relationships to make it to give that exact appearance.
Yep.
And like when you really start to, even just with this show, or there's another hardcore documentary called Open Secret. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's an independently released documentary about a similar situation that was basically just a sex farm for major Hollywood producers and directors, and a couple people who got taken down in Me Too. Where that's why the reason that the Quiet on Set and all these shows are important is because maybe law enforcement wasn't doing shit, but if you put the fucking magnifying glass on it, the chances are they're probably going to be like, wait a minute, what the fuck's going on here? And like, that's the whole, Netflix murder documentaries have done more for murder investigations in the past 10 years than murder investigations. You know what I mean? It's especially like when we're talking about crimes that happened so long ago, like, dude, this was a major topic of conversation amongst people. I was hearing people talking about it on the fucking street. That's mass appeal. The whole country is talking about it. There's some Fed frothing in a fucking bunker somewhere, like, oh, we got to get this motherfucker. Trying to do this shit and get one over on us. We're getting this motherfucker. And they will.
Yeah.
Especially in this situation, it's all documented.
Yeah.
They were all filming it. This is another thing that's like so stupid to me. Like, you'd think that at one point he would have considered that, in retrospect, maybe this isn't going to look so great. Like when 20 years from now, they make a show about how creepy all these things I'm doing are. Yeah. But, I guess at that point, like, well, we were just talking about before we started recording, like you have enough of your life where people aren't challenging you. Then it's like, oh, what else can I get away with?
Yeah. So. Yeah, you start really pushing that boundary because there is no boundary for you.
Who's going to check you?
Yeah. Who's going to check me?
I mean, especially him at that time. He's making Nickelodeon, Viacom, millions of dollars. Yeah. Those are some of the most popular kids' TV shows of that time.
Yeah.
If not the most popular.
And clearly there's a part of him, despite being creepy, that had his finger on the pulse of what we wanted to see, right? Like, he did know how to make a certain quality of product that kept us all engaged. And I think that was ultimately his defense, was always look at the result, look at, the ends justifying the means, look how good the show always winds up. Is that worth it? Obviously it's not. But I think that's part of how that train keeps moving,
Yeah, like we were just saying before, like, do you separate, does it ruin the art? Does it taint the art? It's just a fucking strange scenario. But I guess also for me too, like, this is one of those things where no one wanted to talk about it for so long. These conversations are not conversations that get had on this level. And in the past, 5 years, there's been a lot of these conversations. It's ultimately a good thing. Like, I don't see anything about that documentary as being like salacious or that it shouldn't have been discussed or put into an open forum. It's not damaging to hear reality of life.
No.
You know, it's not damaging. Like so many people live in ignorance every day of the sheer magnitude of the mechanisms that exist so that we can sit in this room and there aren't tanks rolling down the streets.
Yep.
or we're not in general fear of our life or access to food or water. It's crazy. But I really see this shit as like a sickness. It is a sickness, and it's been enabled for so long. And there's like a whole tirade you could go into about like the history of Hollywood. There's this whole argument that like Hollywood just existed for mafia members and super rich people to have like a legal prostitution ring for a very long time, like the beginning of the fucking industry.
Right.
And when you look at it in that context, it makes sense why this behavior is so rampant there. It's because that's what it was. It was a farm for creepy old people to have access to the freshest skin.
Yeah.
And that never changed. And that's why we see that same behavior in like abuse of power in politics, abuse of power. Like how many fucking Republican politicians this year got busted for trying to meet up with somebody on Grindr? Right. You know what I mean? Like this shit
Which is all good, bro. It's
right.
all good. Just stop saying the most hateful shit possible. And just go meet a dude that you like.
Don't be a hypocrite. Just say what. I'm not going to judge you if you tell me that you're on Hinge. I'm going to judge you if you fucking or Grindr. I'm going to judge you if you lie about it.
Not only if you lie about it, if you say like gay people are bad.
Yeah, they're terrible. They're going to burn in hell.
And then you're secretly, but that's
par for the course.
That's always the whatever the phrase is, the kettle calling the fucking pot black.
Yeah, pot calling the kettle black. Exactly. Yeah, I it's one of those things where it's like this shit really is a sickness. It's in so many different areas of life, and it's, for me, there isn't a single thing that any one of those people created that I could do that I would need to survive. Like if giving back one of those shows or pieces of media would reclaim some of their existence, I would be happy to do that.
There's also,
I mean?
I think that there's been, like you said, in the last, I don't know, let's call it 6 years or so since Me Too or whatever, where things from when we were kids are now being talked about in a more realistic manner. Like another perfect example was the documentary about Lou Pearlman. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he managed the Backstreet Boys.
The Dan Schneider of boy bands. Yeah,
exactly. And while there was never accusations of explicit assault, he was hanging out with teenage boys, and he was having them rub his shoulders, and he was pitting them against each other, and so there's that documentary where we're learning about, okay, these groups that we all enjoyed and had posters of and whatever the fuck were not making any money because there was some older person was exploiting them as a product
and subject to some extreme psychological abuse.
Right. So that's a perfect example. There was the documentary that came out not too long ago about it was some kind of Mormon-based school where people in the 90s and 2000s were sending their kids off, and it was, a disciplinary...
Like one of the work camps?
Yeah, it was essentially like a disciplinary school of sorts, but there was like no talking allowed, and there was this very restrict... These are all people in their 30s and shit. So a lot of these things are happening all at once, and I think beyond just these individual instances, it kind of makes us look at what the culture was like when we were kids. Like I do think that there was a thing where I mean there's no other way to say it. I feel like boomers kind of talked to us like we were adults from the beginning, largely.
Yeah, sure.
Like I'm sure a lot of young men can relate to this, being in middle school or high school and having a teacher scream at you like you're their ex-husband.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that there was there was all those talk shows where it was like adults pointing at a teenage girl and yelling at her like, you need to fucking be grateful. And
right.
So there was a culture around like, stick it to those fucking kids. And I think that attitude enabled this level of abuse because we were already looked at in this negative light before we even had a chance to become who we were going to become.
Yeah.
And I felt that in school. I felt that. I think a lot of people that were just sort of outside of the box felt that in their life, where it's like, all of these people are talking to me like I'm a grown ass man, and I'm just 11 trying to figure it out. And I think that, like you Abercrombie models were very much sexualized, and those were
There's
often
the
teenagers.
documentary about that. Yeah.
Another perfect example. I just think that we were a product. We were a product for whether it was us in the public school system, right? We benefited especially being in New York, that everything was the Regents exam, and the Regents exam
determined how much money your school got. Yeah, of course.
So ultimately, it was like the generational divide where it's like we were a product, a means for baby boomers to come up into their like tycoon dreams.
Yes. It does make sense, and like I've spent a fair amount of time thinking about this too. We're Americans. Our purpose is to consume, but to America, we are the product, the consumers.
Yep. Right.
And
that's a great way of putting it.
That is the design. That's the whole of us being the capitalist nature. That's our duty. We need to consume. That's what creates the global markets is consumption, and we consume.
Yeah.
We really consume. We're top consumer.
Yeah.
But, that wasn't necessarily like that started to become a thing during the Industrial Revolution. Before then, it wasn't. The idea of industry being like it is now wasn't even a thought. They hadn't even gotten that far. But definitely after World War II, it becomes the focus, leading us into the baby boom, leading us into the idea of American consumerism really take shape in the 50s.
Yeah.
All the people that were doing propaganda for the war started
now
doing
as adults,
advertising. And
all of these people who have been advertised to death for their entire lives now see us as young people and our talent as their way of fulfilling their dreams. And there's a version of that in every
layer. Yeah,
I just think in this specific instance now we're starting to see how it played out in our time. And I think that is a difficult thing to look at because even like I remember going back and watching The Sopranos again. And there were I grew up like 10 miles away from where the fucking house is in the show,
Yeah.
And there were things about how he addressed his own kids, and like it took me back to that time where it was like, oh yeah, that's how they talk to us.
Yeah.
Like that's really how they talk. That's really how teachers, parents, whoever the fuck, that's how they talk to us.
But again, like you got to think about it. That's how they were raised. Their parents were raised in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Or were immigrants from a much worse situation. Right. And they were fucking working in a factory at 5. That was their parents.
Yeah.
So their shit was extreme. Ours was a little lighter in comparison. But our generation has been the launching pad for all of the big experiments in consumerism, mainly the internet. We were the fucking testing ground for that. We needed to exist. And beyond that, the system that existed even before our parents was the idea of this generation is paying for the next generation. And our generation is the first generation that's like, fuck that. Are you kidding me? You're going to fucking spoil this earth and leave us to inherit it, and you want us to fucking fund your retirement?
Right.
Not going to fucking happen.
Yeah.
That's why we're seeing that become more of a thing. Our generation and Generation X, but 80s and 90s kids are much more willing to entertain this is all some bullshit. And the generations below us, they have TikTok pages about the bullshit. Like they are seriously like, bro,
it's commonplace for them.
I follow a ton of teachers on TikTok, and all of them are like, you don't fuck with the kids right now. They'll call you out. If you've got a loose button somewhere, they'll let it be known. Right. Like they are seeing through the veil of bullshit, and you have to approach them a little bit differently.
And you know what? As they should.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
There's enough. We're the lesson in that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We were the experiment. Yeah,
because what would have imagine in 2010 or whatever. I mean, I was going off to college in 2011. Imagine saying to an adult at that time, "I think this might all be a scam." People would be like,
"Shut
what are you?
Fuck up and go to your class."
Yeah.
Get your fucking degree. Yeah.
And now it is commonplace amongst youth today to understand that unless you are fulfilling
a specific
certain types
goal,
of professions, it's a complete scam.
Yeah.
Now we know that universities put money into fucking endowment money into private equity,
right,
and buy property and shit.
Yeah, right.
Now we know,
right.
And that's all just
and even like student loans.
Right.
The idea of taking on a life-crushing amount of debt at the age of 18 is now not so desirable. Right. People are just like, maybe not.
Right, but
maybe I'll go to a trade school.
But at the time, it was like
expected.
You just saw.
You had to.
It was like 1984. You just lived with the double think. Like I know I'm 18.
This doesn't feel right.
I know I don't have 60 grand for this year, but goddamn, I guess I'll find it sometime in a decade.
Yeah.
As it turns out, you don't.
You don't. There's no money for. Well, it's not just that. It's like that. That's why I said the student loan thing. The interest.
Yeah.
Like the interest is what's killing people on their student loans. It's not paying it back. It's that they can never pay down the interest to start hitting the principal. Because that's by design, because they want you to just continue. They want you to pay $70,000 in interest on a $50,000 loan. That's how they make money.
I think in that culture that we grew up in, if you just say the quiet part out loud a couple of times, it all falls apart. It was all a house of cards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now we're just watching that tumble down a little bit.
Yeah.
As it should. I think it's
dude.
time.
I love it. There I'm sure will be plenty of things in the future relating to media that I love that cancels it. It doesn't bother me in the least bit. I will, and if I know that how I'm consuming it is contributing to that person or that situation,
right.
I won't consume it.
Right.
What's as a consumer, my most powerful tool is my fucking money.
Yeah.
And if I can choose not to funnel money in that direction, I just make those decisions not to. But I'm not, I guess what I mean to say is one of my really good friends always says this and was really saying this during COVID, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, kill your idols. And it's definitely something that I have done, but now it has become just a constant thing in my mind. Kill your idols.
Well, and think
kill
about
your
that.
Fucking idols.
Think about anybody that you might quote unquote idolize that came up in this type of media culture.
Exactly
think about
right.
what kind of people they are.
Exactly right. That's my point.
Like, how many times have you worked for old rockers that have lived in this world where it's like since the early 70s, people have been talking to them like the shit don't stink.
Yeah, just
like
literally wiping their ass.
Like they levitate. You know what I mean? And so now they're incapable of having like basic interactions because they've been hidden from real life.
Yeah.
For 50 years.
Yeah, it's impossible for them to relate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working a gig not too long ago. It was like, and I won't even say the artist, but a very famous artist. They're just walking down a hall to go to their show. I'm coming in with crew food, and they're all like shoving me into a dressing room and shit. Like, he's walking, you can't. And I'm like,
I don't give a fuck.
Give a fuck.
Yeah.
You know what? Just tell me to stand off to the side. What am I going to do? Throw a fucking pizza at him?
This is a hallway. It's where we walk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that or not, but this is how we walk.
So I think that all of those walls coming down, hopefully, is a positive thing. Nobody should be idolized for anything. Enjoyed, appreciated, loved even, but idolized is different.
And you're completely right. And this is why that thing has become so like valuable to me. Idolizing someone might infer that you don't view their faults, and humans are complex individuals. And it's the same reason why I think it's important to hear and experience things that make you uncomfortable. But it's that humans are complex. I don't think there's any person, who gets to any level of fame that we've discussed or notoriety that we've discussed who wouldn't have some real life human shame skeletons in their closet. Whether you or I might judge that as being morally abhorrent, it's up for debate. But at the bottom line, at the end of that day, they have their trauma. They have their issues. They have their skeletons in the closet. Everyone is dealing with something, even those people. Idolizing them removes those human elements from them.
And by the way,
that's why I feel like it's important to remember that we're all just humans. And the more someone does to try and appear one way, realistically, they're probably actually the other way.
And I think that it's important to understand that when we're talking about these things, it's not holding a purity test to every creator.
No, absolutely
what it
not.
is being honest about what actually happened, and then that person who's being talked about now has the option to go, man, I really fucked up. There's your redemption moment, and they never take it. They can never just say, "Yup."
Did you see Dan Schneider's? Did you see that?
Oh, that was
thing?
a fucking fugazi,
that was
bro.
so staged.
That was such a fugazi.
Painful. But I'll just pull up the highlights of the video. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I thought that there were elements of what he was saying that he meant. I think that it has complete blind spots around his own behavior that he's not willing to acknowledge. And it's the cognitive dissonance on this is pretty wild. Like I think the emotion he shows about Drake Bell and everything, I think that's authentic. But when he says, "Oh, I was a tough boss to work for, and I was a ball breaker and whatever," bro. This is not a documentary about you being a ball breaker.
Yeah.
This is a documentary about how you would put liquids into syringes instead of cum shots on little girls. That's what this is about. This is about the fact that you had ketchup on Ariana Grande's feet.
Yeah.
This is,
dude, okay. So
that's what this is about. It's not about you being a dick on set.
Perfect segue. There's two things I want to say here. One, I got down a rabbit hole about at some point Dan Schneider allegedly talked to Quentin Tarantino, who also has a foot fetish, about compiling all of the foot fetish videos. And a thing they talk about in the video is that everybody did it.
Yeah.
He got a video, and that was like part of the sick pleasure for him is acquiring the shit. And at one point he was discussing with Quentin Tarantino to direct to compile a 3-hour-long foot fetish extravaganza for them to tug it to,
or just working on something specifically
of all the clips that both he and Quentin Tarantino had of famous actresses with shit on their feet. Weird.
That's very odd.
And there was another strange tangent. Oh, this is another thing that could be complete rumor mill, but I think it's hilariously worth asking. Slime. There's an idea that the reason it was green is so that it could be green screened to any other color. And one of the things that era of people at Nickelodeon were making,
their own personal edits.
Obscure fetish video, but disguising it in a way that it could be broadcast to.
Wow.
Like there's some very dark shit, obviously. And again, like I will go back to what I was saying before. This is baked into the Hollywood experience. This has always been part of it. That shit in The Lion King, that shit in all your favorite Disney cartoons, sex and words in the background, random shots of nudity, those are real. Those are actually in there. And they were put in by people who wanted to be perverted by putting very adult content into movie made.
And do it in a subversive.
Yeah, right. A way that would allow
to the outside viewer
for plausible deniability. Oh, that just looks like that. It's pareidolia. That's not what it is.
Yeah.
But like, those
couldn't
are
be
just
a giant cock on the Little Mermaid.
Yeah, right. No, not at all. It couldn't be an actual picture from a porn in the window of the mice that go on the adventure. Whatever, doesn't matter. Fuck Disney. But those two places are just rather sinister. But that's not the only place it is happening. And realistically, just look at the celebrities who are now. A lot of them come from these scenarios. And when we see, they are lucky if they go their whole life without having a utter meltdown. And on top of whatever personal trauma they had a ton of trauma from this scenario that they found themselves in. You're completely right. It's indicative of the time. That was happening. That was open secret shit everywhere. There would be jokes about that. People used to laugh at things.
We were young people when it became like teacher fucked the student.
Yeah.
How fucking badass is that? Yeah. Like that.
Another South Park episode. Nice.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Nice. Yeah.
Like that was when we were kids.
Yeah.
And people watched the news. I think adults watched that and went, well, that can't be happening in my kid's school. I've been to parent-teacher conferences. I've been to da-da-da-da. Well, it was in your kid's school.
Yeah.
Even if it was just one teacher, there's a good chance
statistically
that was in your school.
Yeah. Like just for instance, do you know the stats?
I know.
Okay. So when I was in middle school or high school, I was a part of, it was a class, but we were like a theater group. and we would go around and we would talk to kids at all the elementary schools and middle schools, and some of the high schools about violence, bullying, and sexual abuse prevention. So at every school we go to, there would be a history, and our instructor would tell us, like, oh, here at this school, we've caught this, and these, we had these disclosures. At this school, it's these, every neighborhood, rich, poor, white, black, Asian, doesn't matter.
Sure.
It's everywhere.
Yep.
And now with the things that I do here in New York City, it is definitely everywhere. I've been forced to witness some of the most sinister elements of people's behavior in this town, and that's like 25% of it, of all the shit that happens. And that's just the stuff that gets disclosed. But the statistics, I'm pretty sure the last time I checked, were 1 in 6 boys, 1 in 4 girls have some kind of SA experience, and I guess averages out to 1 in 4 children, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But just so that people can kind of like conceptualize that, it happens everywhere.
Right.
It doesn't matter. And statistically, it's somebody that the child knows and has a close personal relationship with.
And I think these extreme instances where it's in high places help to illuminate what was commonplace.
Yeah.
Because you're going, wow, this is so crazy. And then you start thinking about like,
well, if this was happening there, if this was happening there, when there was a million eyes on it and literally making a show, like documenting it, what happened when there weren't cameras around?
And I think we're all
everywhere in the world.
I think we're all doing a little inventory on that right now.
We should. And I guess what I mean to say by that statistic is you should.
Yeah.
Because the way that we were raised is fundamentally different than how children were raised. And we were the last generation that was raised by that. After us, kids didn't get hit. We were the last generation that got spanked.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But even just spanking your kids, like that can create some sexual trauma that manifests itself as something later in life.
Sure.
So we should analyze our experiences and just be cognizant that, again, like when I say it's a sickness, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's not just in one locality. Every city, every town, every state, everywhere in the world, men, women.
Yep.
The numbers of what is reported do not lie, and it's a serious fucking issue.
And just on a real basic level, how many of us have just witnessed adults abusing their power? Like we all saw that. You know what I mean?
In school. Not even just other people's parents.
I think I saw it the most in school.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the majority of it was in school.
It was completely unshit. Like there were some like definitely moments where I was like, adult, you're really acting out of pocket.
The lines were incredibly blurry. Particularly once you leave wherever you're from, you realize just how blurry they are.
Yeah.
You know, and then you get the retrospect of seeing an 18-year-old kid, a 17-year-old kid, a 16-year-old kid, and you think, well, what are some of the things I went through at that age? And maybe some of them aren't appropriate, or maybe some of them were abusive and I blamed myself, or what. We're all taking stock of that. And I think that guys like Dan Schneider, guys like Lou Pearlman are examples that help to illuminate what was commonplace.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I also think it's funny that even like the Hollywood Predator has a type. Like Ron Perlman, Dan Schneider, Brian Peck, like put them in a lineup. They're pretty similar.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, weird, greasy looking guys that in today's standards, people would immediately question if they were around children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But back then it was like, oh, he makes me a lot of money, so I don't care.
Brian Peck worked after he went to prison.
Yeah. Oh, bro.
That's the part that I think is probably the most heartbreaking, is that he was just welcomed.
Well,
back
you would think that not only after it happened, but especially after it happened, that there would have been some kind of screening protocol to require I have to not be a sexual offender to work here.
Yeah.
But that didn't exist. It might still not exist. And the reason that it won't exist is because a lot of people are probably going to get fired.
Right.
Like I think
force you to clean house.
It was the same thing with Me Too. I remember it was one of the award shows after Me Too, and they had like really cleaned house with Weinstein and a couple of guys that were in that open secret documentary, like directors who got just completely canceled. And there was somebody giving a speech about the importance of Me Too, and like the camera pans around, 50% of that room wasn't clapping because 50% of that room has either participated in it or is doing nothing to stop it because it benefits them.
Or has their own shit that they haven't processed.
Yeah, sure.
You know, I think that could be a part of it too. But I think the silence of that instance is the loudest thing you could do.
It would take me a while to find that clip, but if I could find it and show it to you, it'd be like it makes the rounds on like Instagram and TikTok. I'll occasionally see it, like looking back to it, because it was just an especially tense moment, and you would think like everyone in this room, decidedly liberal industry, is going to be applauding, but they're not, because they have some of their own skeletons in the closet, or are processing their own traumas from it. And it's just going to be a thing now that every year some aspect of your childhood is going to get crushed by the reality of what was going on when it happened, because I don't want to get too into this because I want to save it for a little bit in the Patreon, but we have to bring it up, and it will just segue into later, like Puff Daddy. This shit, and after him, it's going to be Jay-Z. They're already fucking circling him. I just feel like there aren't many scenarios where you get to that level of fame and you don't have some like actual tangible problems that you need to like, cover up or suppress. But, bro, Diddy's situation is fucking crazy. Like they're saying it's Epstein and scale. Like I've heard that very frequently, and it's pretty accurate in the sense that he had the money, he had the means, and it's been an open secret.
And
it's
frankly,
been an open secret for a very long time.
And honestly, if we're being really real, he is substantially more culturally significant than Dan Schneider or really anything that was going on at Nickelodeon. I mean, even just yesterday.
Yeah, dude, 100%.
Even just yesterday, I was listening to, shout out Joey Badass, great album, 2000.
Nice. Yeah, hell yeah.
Love me some Joey Badass. I'm listening to the intro track, and it's Puff, hyping this kid up. Like I'm passing the torch down to the next generation. And I think about, like, as a musician myself making hip hop music, if I was put in that position and Diddy wanted to hype me up to open this is 3 years ago, dude, I would have fucking cried.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? So I think that what makes that story so much crazier is the level of cultural significance. Like, at the end of the day, Epstein had no cultural significance.
No.
He was a figure
he had
that we all became aware of.
Cultural influence at best.
Diddy has influence over our music, over our fashion, over a lot of how...
Bro, rock the vote.
Yeah.
Like, for a while, he was kind of an icon of the generation.
Yeah.
Like, he could do no wrong. Whatever he did was going to be a success.
Yeah. Any shiny music, shiny suit, hip hop puns were all Diddy. I loved shiny suit hip hop.
Even just him being like, he even in the 90s was already kind of becoming like the character. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like the idea of Diddy ascends who he actually is as a person.
Sure.
In the popular lexicon. Yeah, he is, a Cosby-like figure.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in some ways, way more of a revolutionary, right, than Cosby was. Cosby was sort of part of his success was his ability to kind of fit into white America's expectations at that time. Diddy was a part of the culture that blew that shit out of the water and brought us Biggie Smalls. Yeah. Brought us these artists that were speaking honestly about what was happening in America.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of what makes it so heartbreaking, is that we're talking about a guy who helped to give voice to things that didn't have that voice prior. And so that for me is part of what makes that particular incident, so difficult to process is how much admiration I and a lot of people have had for him over the years. I didn't have any real admiration for any of these other people that are being discussed. That one hits home a little more. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, a lot of the other guys were kind of like lurking in the shadow motherfuckers, and P. Diddy was like always out in the open. But he's not He's not alone.
Of course not.
A similar. This is also could be compared to Jimmy Savile. I don't know if you know anything about Jim, another great Netflix documentary.
He was killing people, right?
Well, I don't think there's any proof that he was murdering anyone, but he is. He's associated with some of the most sadistic shit. And like on a scale that surpassed fucking Epstein,
right? But he was the British talk show guy that was like, oh, let me go visit this kid with cancer and da da da. Yep, yeah.
They literally gave him. He would raise money for these hospitals, children's hospitals.
Yeah,
and they would give him keys, and then he would just abuse everybody in the hospital.
Yeah, it's wild.
And beyond. Like there's that rabbit hole. His whole dude. He was doing it for fucking 50, 60 years. Everyone knew about it. There's a famous interview with Johnny Rotten where Johnny Rotten is like basically just spilling the tea, and that interview got suppressed. BBC didn't let that one get out. Louis Theroux, BBC documentarian, did one of the last things that Jimmy Savile did before he died, but it's like this mini documentary, and Louis Theroux just wasn't a confident enough documentarian at the time to like really press him because dude, Jimmy Savile had power. Right. Like royal family power.
He was like a Letterman type.
Royal family power. Like personal relationships with the ruling class. And there's like one scandal during the 80s where a bunch of Margaret Thatcher's cabinet gets embroiled in like this another abuse scandal based out of an orphanage. And there's like circumstantial evidence to say that he was absolutely involved in the sadistic behavior, and there's like some deaths, I don't know if they're murders, but mysterious deaths associated with that. But the shit goes deep. And like, you know, that I guess that's the other thing too, is like when I was doing that theater troupe, I knew the stats, like the current stats, early 2000s, what everything looked like, and the bare minimum of how to, if a disclosure was given to me, how to like pass that along to the appropriate medical professionals and legal professionals. But you know, just as I got older and like understood the context of the conversation, it doesn't take long to quickly find like a bunch of similar situations all around the globe at all points in history, implicating all the kinds of people who have had their asses wiped for so long that they think they can do no wrong. And you know, at the end of the day, most people's morality would say that would never happen, but you and I both know that they operate in a different morality. We've witnessed it.
Sure.
I've witnessed it in many different contexts, and that is the reality. But I mean, if people don't want to believe that, that's fine. But
a perfect example, you know, we worked festivals for years. You've read about what happened with Base Nectar, right? I mean, I would imagine I've worked probably 10 Base Nectar shows, right? I would imagine I've been on site when he was doing that.
Yeah.
With no clue.
Yep.
Right? So it could be literally right here, dude. You know? And oftentimes it is right there.
It is right there. Yeah. You know, I guess that's the other thing that I think it's important that people know about this shit is because it could be right there.
Yeah. It could be in a dressing room and you just don't know who's in that dressing room. 1 in 4, those are... you know, there's another conversation. Like, okay, so not talking about children, let's talk about adults. Even what's reported in terms of assaults on consenting adults, what's reported is not what actually happens. Sure. Because a lot of what happens doesn't get reported for a number of reasons. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely more a part of just general culture. It's reflective in the media of that time. We are starting to get away from that, which I personally love. I've always even hated like situations where I'd be at work and it was a bunch of guys talking about guy shit. It's just like, bro, I just am here to work. I don't want to fucking hear what you fucked last night and the details about it. I don't care. I don't want to know. Right.
I want to eat my lunch and go home.
Yeah.
You know, I feel, again, our generation, the generations below us, were all a little more open to analyzing our mental situation. We're all a little more open to having tougher conversations. And definitely the younger generations have a goddamn bone about uncovering the bullshit.
A different relationship with authority and institutions. That's the big one.
Yeah.
is that relationship has gotten broken down, which can go two ways. It can turn you into an inquisitive person, or it can turn you into like a conspiratorial person.
Sure.
And I think that those are two different things, but I think that those are kind of the two choices you have. You can become someone who wants to, dig for truth, or you become a QAnon person who wraps all of this very complicated shit into this little tiny ghoul and
like
warlock
Pizzagate.
bubble.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That simplifies it when it's so much more complicated than that you just look stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, 100%. Like I said, humans are complex.
Yeah.
And I think that with all of the documentaries that have come out in the past 10 years about the levels that some of these folks go to, the level of complexity they go to enact their scheme, this is high order shit.
Yeah.
This is high order shit. It requires a lot of effort and energy to hurt people on the scale that these folks were hurting people. And, I don't know. It's just one of those things where it's like, everything should be taken with grains of salt. And definitely, like, we just have to stop idolizing people. You want to idolize someone? Idolize your fucking self. Right. Idolize the people in your family who pay their bills and take care of their kids. That's who you idolize.
Yeah.
Fuck these other motherfuckers. And like, whatever. I'm not saying all of the people in that strata are assholes or abusive pieces of shit. But like, just because they're in that strata, that's just their job.
Right.
Their life transpired to have that be their job. And a lot of them look at it the same way you and I look at doing whatever we do to get paid. So you want to idolize somebody, idolize your fucking self. Idolize the people in your social circle who are behaving, in a way that you want to see the world behave. That's who you idolize.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it, bro, is people that are actually in your life doing positive shit. Like that's who's worthy of that praise, ultimately. It's not just like somebody who's rich and successful. And
the people who are rich and successful, they don't fucking need it.
Right.
You know who needs it? The people in your circle.
Yeah.
They need that.
Yeah.
Like everyone is going to benefit from one of their circle being like,
right. Puff is not going to be hurt because you don't listen to their music.
Yeah.
Your friend might be, though.
Well, and what's interesting too, like, I don't know how far you went down the Mace rabbit hole, but like watching Mace didn't get abused.
I don't know anything.
Mace didn't get abused like that, but Mace got abused business wise.
Right.
Like Puffy Mace continually was like, I want to know what you want to, like, I want to know how to do this like you do it so I can do it myself. And Puffy would like deliberately squash him down and kind of keep him at a certain strata. And that's why he ends up breaking away. And I think he signed with like Cameron.
Right.
And has been doing stuff with them and is now like a multifaceted business person because he expected that to kind of be a mentorship, but fortunately he didn't get sucked into any of the more sadistic shit.
Right.
He may have been like the one artist that got away from it, but okay, so we're over an hour. We're talking about Diddy. Definitely want to save this for the second half. For everyone that made it this far, thank you so much. Dakota, thank you for coming on. Any last words for the folks?
The truth sets you free, guys. I know that sounds so fucking corny, but it's not a bad thing to just be honest about what happened. It's the only way you can move on. So this was a big topic to get into, but I think it's important. It's happening at the right time.
Yeah, it's an important conversation, and I think the more people talking about it, the more awareness we have. That's all we can ask for. But all right, folks, this has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. If you want to watch the rest, it'll be on Patreon. That is all. See you later.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva. That's obnoxious. Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva. Literally no one cares. For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod. When will this end? Thank you for listening. Now get back to work. Move it along, buddy.